Caribbean art refers to the visual as well as plastic arts originating from the islands of the Caribbean. Art in the Caribbean reflects thousands of years of habitation by the Arawak peoples of the Caribbean, followed by waves of immigration, which included artists of European origins and subsequently by artists with heritage from countries all around the world. The nature of Caribbean art reflects these diverse origins, as artists have taken the traditions and adapted these influences to reflect the reality of the lives in the Caribbean. The governments of the Caribbean have at times played a central role in the development of Caribbean culture. However, some scholars and artists challenged this governmental role. Historically and in later times, artists have combined British, French, Spanish, Dutch and African artistic traditions, at times embracing European styles and at other times working to promote nationalism by developing distinctly Caribbean styles. Caribbean art remains the combination of these various influences. Early influences. The first immigrants to the Caribbean region were the Indians, or Taino, and the Arawak. These early Caribbeans are supposed to have occupied the region since 2000 BC. In Puerto Rico and the Lesser Antilles, the Taino-Arawak art has been found in stone carvings, figurines and pottery dating from the period before European contact and are said to be as old as 2400 years. These few discovered artifacts, preserved in museum collections, have contributed new culturally hybrid art forms. Not until the 1950s and 1960s did a small number of Caribbean artists begin to renew and in some cases reinvent indigenous art forms. Currently there are no indigenous artists practicing in any media in the Caribbean. Art in the colonial period. The settlement in the Caribbean islands began by the Spanish on the island of Hispaniola as early as 1496. They then settled on Puerto Rico, followed by Cuba. They did not colonize Trinidad until 1592. It is extremely unlikely that the Taino-Arawak people had any input to the Spaniard artistic developments, since it has been estimated that the population was quickly depleted from 200,000 to as little as 500. French settlers arrived in the Caribbean in the 1625 and established trading ports on the islands of St. Kitts, Tortuga in Saint-Domingue, Martinique, and Guadeloupe. Near the end of the 17th century, the population of the French Caribbean was growing steadily, but the territory was increasingly isolated from France because in 1674 the French trading company finally failed, and few artists had arrived from Europe. Currently little or no research has been done to highlight the early French-influenced art forms originating in the Caribbean, nor to list artists who might fit within this category. Although Trinidad was never governed by the French, the island's original settlers, the Spanish, allowed planters from the French islands to settle and develop the country from about 1777. The effect of French occupation can be seen in the names of places and to a smaller extent in the laws of the country, so it is highly possible that art also may have early French influences. According to Jamaican art historian Petrine Archer, there is sparse evidence of local art production in any of the islands prior to the 20th century, other than from the occasional visiting European. Haiti was a lone exception. Contemporary trends in Caribbean art. Art made in the Caribbean by living Caribbean artists refers to a range of visual, media, performance, and other practices that are critically acclaimed. There has been much debate over whether a national style, philosophical outlook, or unified and cohesive culture exists or ever has existed within the Caribbean. Geographically it is large, with many distinct regions, and its population are diverse and made up of varying national and ethnic backgrounds. Also, distinctions between high art and popular art seem to be becoming less clear. making the task of locating common characteristics of Caribbean art and culture increasingly difficult. Tumelo Mosaka, curator at the Brooklyn Museum, suggests, today, consistent throughout most islands is the division between mainstream artist movements more closely related to European stylistic trends and often rooted in national development, and self-taught artists whose artworks reflect ritual preoccupations related to spiritual movements such as revivalism, Santeria and Vodou, and less exposure to art movements abroad. More recently, contemporary artists influenced by postmodernism's concerns with identity have found ways to fuse both forms, resulting in art that appear peculiarly unique to the Caribbean experience. There are, however, a few notable moments when Caribbean contemporary artists, as individuals or groups, have distinguished themselves through commonality, international recognition, collaboration, or the spirit of the times. Modern art in the Caribbean reflects an engagement with the region's cultural past. Archer describes recent trends as the self-conscious and satirical embracing of cultural memory styled in unconventional settings, installations and off-the-wall works that straddle African traditions and European postmodern ideas of primitive creativity. Quote, "It is an imagery in history which is yet to be resolved.